All right. Good. Oh, we are seeing the wrong screen over there is what I can see. Hold on a second. Let me try to get the right one there for you all. It's always a little bit. Okay, let's try it like this. I'm still getting the wrong one. Okay, I will work on it in a minute. I think it's okay if we do it like this. Welcome everybody to today's session. We're going to be talking today about compassionate leadership. Today is the first of our taster series with the new HKU-UBS Sustainable and Social Innovation Leadership Program, SSILP for short. I am Lucy Jordan, and I'm one of the co-directors, and I'm really excited that you're joining us today. In today's session, we are going to start off with just this quick welcome. Then we're going to have a couple of opening exercises. I'm going to offer some insights from academic sector in literature about the topic. And then we're going to have the sort of keystone part of the session with our insights from leaders in the field. We're really excited to welcome the panelists, Dorothy Lamb from Dream Impact and Sky Sue from Kelly Support Group. And have time for Q&A from what I call the floor, you all out there. You can always drop Q&A into the Q&A form of the webinar anytime along. And then at the end, we'll leave you with a few thoughts for developing skills and some resources for your further follow-up going forward. So the first part, what I want to do is welcome you to the opening session meditation. Can you click on the display? Someone's talking to me about how to change. I know, I wish I could change it properly, but I feel like I can't without changing what we're doing. Okay, I'll try again. This is always the technology problem. Hold on a second. How about this? Aha, et voila. Okay, perfecto. Okay. Excellent. So what I want to do now is turn it over to Dai Xiaolu, who is one of our current research postgraduate students here in the Department of Social Work and Social Administration at the University of Hong Kong. She is working with one of our colleagues who does mindfulness interventions in the applied setting. So often working with populations who are service users and client populations of many of the types of NGOs that people in the sector in Hong Kong and in the greater Bay Area work with. So what we want to do is take the first few minutes of this session to slow down and to be through a few-minute guided meditation of mindfulness so that we can then start our learning from that point going forward. So Xiaolu, I want to pass it over to you now.
Okay, thank you, Lucy. So now I would like to invite everyone to find a comfortable sitting position and allowing your eyes to close or rest on a point in front of you, but not the screen. Breathe gently and focus your attention on each inhale and exhale. Breathing in and breathing out. Allowing your ears to pick up the sounds from the space you are in, the sounds from the house or building, perhaps family members, co-workers, the sound from outside, and perhaps you can even hear sounds from your body. Appreciating these sounds as the concert of your life. Now, bring your awareness to whatever you are sitting on. Appreciating the quality of support it gives your body. And now, shifting your awareness to the body sitting here. The posture, weight, where it touches the chair, and perhaps the floor. Appreciating how the body keeps us sitting. Now, bring your awareness to the breath as it flows in and out of the body. Bring your attention further inside to the vital functions of the body. The respiration, the lungs inhaling and exhaling. Bring oxygen to the whole body. The heart beating, pumping the blood around the vessels. The gut, perhaps digesting a meal. Appreciating this complex machinery keeps us alive. And now, asking yourself, how am I feeling right here and now? What is your inner weather? See if you can find 1 or 2 words that describe how you are feeling at this very moment. Bring your attention back gently to your breath. Continue to notice the inhale and the exhale. And breathing in, breathing out. In a moment, you will hear the bell again, and you can open your eyes. Okay, so now you can open your eyes and stretch a little bit. This is the end of today's mindfulness meditation.
Thank you so much, Shalu. That was really, really lovely. And thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. One last housekeeping thing, which is just a note that we are recording this. So yeah, just so people know that they have the choice to sign off if they're not wanting to be included in the recording. So thank you very much. And I apologize for not mentioning that beforehand. I chose this particular picture of this lotus as being a little bit off center, but also perfect. And I hope that we think about that as we move through our discussion today about compassionate leadership in the nonprofit sector, because we're always dealing with changing environment and changing conditions, right? Just like our meditation said as well. And, you know, we may strive, right, to be the best we can be and enable those of us around us to do the same thing. But we're often going to be pushed and flown off center, right? And need to find an equilibrium point again. So I thought that was a really nice image to sort of represent what I'm wanting us to think about a bit as we go through the sharing today. So the next thing I'm going to do is, oops, come back here, turn to a quick Mentimeter activity that I've loaded here. So what I'm wanting people to think about is, in one word, what do you think about when I say, what is compassionate leadership? And what I want you to do is think of one word answers that you can use. that you can then add into the Mentimeter. So this is the different ways that you can access it. And there we go. Excellent. Okay. Excellent. There it comes. Sometimes it feels like magic. You wonder if it's going to work or not. Any further thoughts? Oh, we got a few more coming in. Let's give this maybe another 60 seconds. We have a clear leader in empathy. Okay, the last 30 seconds. I can see we have people with different background here too, because we've even got some people talking about different psychology theorists, Carl Rogers, but then also a lot of people, talking about different kinds of qualities. So one of the things that I wanted to start off with thinking about our own ideas here is because, right, recognizing that we may have different thoughts, right, based on material that we cover. Okay, let me get back to the slides. Yeah, okay. Based on the material that we cover. So I wanted us to first think about what your own ideas are about it. The second part I want to do, right, is the insights from the academic sector. So what we did here was take a quick walk through 4 different topics. So broadly speaking about compassionate leadership, then trying to drill it down more specifically into the nonprofit field. Thinking as well about the intersectionality between compassionate leadership and risk management, as well as leadership and with compassion and the time of COVID. So thinking about wanting to make this temporally, relevant, but also drawing on different aspects of the literature that could inform it. This first figure here shows the proportionate areas within a scholarly literature that we found things. And to me, it's not super surprising to see that there is a highest incidence in kind of health management, right? So nursing, because this literature is quite dominated, especially in the last few years, by the pandemic. But of course, healthcare is not the only place that we've been seeing the impact of the pandemic, and certainly is not the only sort of compassion-led, led field. And we can also see that management, which is often where nonprofit, field intersects as part of that, is almost the second highest next to the healthcare fields, nursing, and then the other cognate areas. Of course, have relevance broadly across the nonprofit sector, because the nonprofit sector is not just about social, right? I mean, social is often very important, but it also the education field, environmental, there are many different kind of aspects to the nonprofit sector beyond social delivery services. But I think it's kind of interesting to have a look at how the concept of compassionate leadership cuts across many different fields in many different areas. So the first theme about compassionate leadership, there are a number of different theories that we could use to help explain what does it mean. So one of them comes out of a strain of thinking about social change leadership. So, leadership that is meant to kind of help bring about change, and also working in the field of social change. Another one I think which is kind of interesting is about paradox theory and also conservation of resources. I think that that's interesting to me, because I think that there is perhaps sometimes a paradox in this idea about, I was thinking that when we started our meditation today, slowing down when we have more to do, right? Because there's often I think a famous quote from the Dalai Lama about how, like the days that I have the most to do, I'll meditate for 2 hours in the morning, right? Like I sometimes I can't find 5 minutes in the morning, right? When I feel really, really busy. And, I think that there is a paradox about some of the slowing down, to kind of be able to understand and see things. And what we know from some of the literature about the biological systems as well, say polyvagal theory about the way our nervous system operates, a mindfulness approach is going to be something that helps to slow down the the nervous system, right? And if we slow down the nervous system and not shut it down, but slow it down with simple breathing, that can help us have a more kind of light and productive mindset about things, which of course is going to be something that's going to be really critical to leading with compassion. There also are interesting strains of research, not surprisingly, but we also know that some of them are centered here, in Hong Kong, and indeed in our department, about sort of the influence of Confucian values and theories around leading with the mind-heart, right? So what does it mean to practice compassionate leadership? So some people talk about it's engaging in appreciative, caring conversations. So this is something that comes a bit out of the strain of thinking about appreciative inquiry. Another kind of major approach and method that is often taught in leadership programs to help cultivate more appreciative leaders and more appreciative collegial relationships in work environments. There's a fair amount of literature that helps us understand some of the barriers to developing compassionate leadership. So if we can think about barriers, right, then we can also think about ways to change. We can think about how to change, how to empower people, to overcome barriers. So we can think about those as being both internal or external. So internal can be things that have to do with our own person self, right? So things that we can work on. And then external, of course, has more to do with ourselves in relation to the other aspects of our work environment. And thinking about how to as a manager or a leader, right? We need to think for ourselves, but also for those that are working with us as well, about are there some things that we can do to help those people as well. And this three-level model from Papadopoulos talks about similarly in one model this idea about personal characteristics, experiences, and leadership style, but also system-related factors and staff-related factors. And then importantly, I think for understanding why we feel that the topic is worthy of kicking off our taster session is that there's literature that suggests that it can really have an impact. So it can contribute to individual and collective well-being and help to mitigate burnout. It can have an impact on human resource management and can lead to reductions in turnover rates. And it can also help to prevent abuse in certain types of collective settings, say like collective care settings. I was thinking about, the recent very unfortunate news we had in Hong Kong about the, some of the abuse in some of the care facilities. So again, right, one can think sometimes about a link, between well-being and some of those things popping up. The second theme we looked at is about the compassionate leadership, more specifically in the nonprofit field. And the things I really want to highlight here are some of these ideas which we do plan to delve into more in our full curriculum series coming up in 2023. So the idea about servant leadership and leaders. So, again, this is a really interesting area if you're not familiar with it, something that I would be happy to talk about more when time permits. as well as gendered leadership. So there's some evidence that suggests that compassionate leadership may be already kind of more associated with women leadership in the nonprofit field. And we could have lots of discussions about why, right? Is this culturally informed, that women are sort of taught to be more compassionate, or is it something other than that as well? And then there's also a line of thought that talks about the usefulness of training and coaching and sustainability. So, nurturing talent, and ensuring that leaders don't burn out, right? A very important issue in the nonprofit sector. From compassionate leadership in risk management, there is evidence that suggests that developing a compassionate mindset can help to address crises, both within families for people that work in family services, but also social issues, very deep seated social issues to do with equity, racism, but also different types of disasters. And there are certain qualities here that are quite associated with mindfulness training, awareness, vulnerability, empathy, and compassion, which are thought to be critical for helping business leaders to care for people in crisis and also to facilitate recovery in business. Then the final theme that we touched on is looking at compassionate leadership and COVID. So there has been a kind of a surge of newer scholarship looking at this topic in the past few years. And there is a rationale for adopting compassionate leadership during the ongoing COVID pandemic crisis. One, because it has led to increased stress and therefore a need for compassion from leaders, right? To facilitate the well-being of those in their work environment, and also that it has seen as helping to generate feelings of altruism and emotional intelligence in the workforce when the leader can practice these things. As would be expected from our earlier look, it's really highly linked with reducing workplace stressors, the impact of workplace stressors, and alleviating stress experience among employees. And that it has been seen to help people make better evidence-based decisions as well. So, having to make decisions very quickly is something that we've had to pivot a lot to in the recent years. And then one of the things as well that was found in one study is that it can be helpful for helping with training people, right? If we start in early training programs in education systems, that this can have a long time, ripple effect then on, the well-being of those individuals, but also of the institutions and organizations that these people then go out into. So we can think about it as being a kind of seed for the future. So I know that was a quick whistle-stop tour through talking about some of the scholarly concepts and ideas around compassionate leadership. And the next thing that we want to turn to is the discussion with our panelists. So I'm really excited today that we have two wonderful panelists, Ms. Dorothy Lam, who is the co-founder and chief catalyst from Dream Impact. I love that title. And then we've got Ms. Sky Su from the Kelly Support Group, who is the executive director. And what's going to happen during this section is I'm going to lead a mediated discussion with the two panelists. We're going to then have some time for Q&A from the participants on the floor. And so what I want you to do, though, is feel free, if you have thoughts or questions that pop up, ideas, you can put them in the Q&A on the webinar, which you can find on the bar with all of the controls, or you can raise them up once we have gone through a bit of discussion, but we will come back to address some of those Q&As directly when we've gone through a bit of the conversation. So if I could invite Dorothy and Sky to turn on their videos.
Hi.
Hello. I hear Sky, I think, and there's Dorothy. Excellent. Okay, good. I see you're on two devices. That's why I didn't know your video was on. Lovely. Okay, so Let's see, I think I'll start with you, Sky. I have to start with someone. So Sky, what is compassionate leadership to you? Yeah, so what does it mean to you based on your experience?
Yeah, thank you so much, Lucy, and thanks for just sort of a little bit of the information as well. Very happy to be here to share a little bit of my experience as well, just working in the field. I think compassionate leadership is such an interesting terminology because, especially when applied to the nonprofit sector, I think it's almost a given. You know, when you ask nonprofit leaders, what is a key value that you hold in being a leader in a nonprofit sector, a lot of people will think of compassion in general. But when you combine the two, compassionate leadership, and you put that into practice, I think from my perspective, it covers so much of what everybody said earlier, of course, including the empathy and all of that. And for me, I think because Kelly Support Group is a youth organization, and for us, you know, working with young people means that our whole team is also really young as well. And one thing that I have found is in order to be a compassionate leader, you have to be somebody who actually understands as well and has empathy, not just for the people that you are serving on the ground and in the field, but actually also for the people that you are leading to do the work that you want to do ultimately as an organization. So from my perspective, I really value and really respect my colleagues as collaborators, as people that we work together. And I think that that's something that helps me to be compassionate, because the more that I value and I respect their perspective and their position, and also their experiences working within the organization at a level that sometimes I don't get to as much, I think that helps me to become more compassionate, to be more empathetic, to be more understanding of what it is that they're going through, and ultimately how we can benefit the young people that we are serving the most and in the most impactful way. So in short, I think I would really see compassionate leadership as really being, from my own personal experience, really being grounded in valuing and respecting others that I'm surrounded with.
Right. Yeah, no, that's excellent. I mean, you said so many things there that I think we could come back to more, but like I'm first going to pivot to Dorothy, but then we're going to dig in a little bit deeper into some of it. So, and I already think there's a lot of synergies too, right, between you and Dorothy. I mean, I think Dorothy has a very different type of organization, but I feel that, yeah, there's a lot of similarities. So Dorothy, for yourself, what is compassionate leadership in your experience?
Yeah, thank you, Lucy. I'm also sharing the literature previously. I think especially on the mind-heart combination. I think in Chinese, you know, the word "sum," right? Xin, it's both your mind and your heart. And how are you connected to both and not just be separated on the mind? I think that's also the beginnings of feeling compassionate, of being compassionate. And for us, Dream Impact is a very different organization. We're a platform for social enterprises to grow and scale. So actually, we value growth a lot, but on the personal level, on the community level, and also on the business level, and also on the ecosystem level. So we really treasure, I think, on compassionate leadership is balancing the growth in achieving targets, but also having patience with the team and also with the company. I think often in social innovation, there is this urge of growth and also innovation and speed. So how can we actually balance that but also being centered in where we are coming from and the internal parts as well. And also then on the leadership part, it's on the team, what Sky mentioned, you know, being compassionate on the staff. For us on the growth, rather than only talking about the company growth, we also talk about each staff. And what we find a lot of challenges is that people feel that the nonprofit or the social innovation career path is unclear or uncertain. So we meet a lot of university students, they're not sure what social innovation can mean or what the next steps can mean, because in corporate, they can feel that they have a very clear development career path. So we're trying to paint the same picture for our team as a leader as well, right? So how they can come in as an assistant to associate to leader to manager to director, that we are actually compassionate on what they want to grow as well. And so that by aligning the individual's growth vision with the company vision, then we can truly achieve that growth together. So for me, it's also practicing listening to their needs and their interests and balancing that as well.
Yeah, so interesting, isn't it? I mean, again, I mean, we had some preparation in advance, but having us here live talking together, like, because I think you have very different types of organizations, which is partially what I think is so great about having you both here, right? Because, to me, when we think about the nonprofit sector, I feel it's so important that we're looking at the big sort of diversity in the field, right? And in some ways, I would call Kelly's support, it focuses on support, right? Supportive services, which is maybe a bit more of our kind of classic idea in a way, right? Though it's, I think, quite innovative also. But then Dream Impact, right, has a very different, sort of focus about sort of its theory of change model. It's, it's how you all are thinking about creating this different kind of social change ecosystem, right? It's like you're looking at, it's less about change, say, for like the population that's being served, right, in terms of like the service user target population, but more about change on different kinds of levels within the field. And but it's, and so I think kind of thinking about how the in Dream Impact, you're having to think about some of the kind of business side of things a bit more, maybe we could even say, right, this thing about balancing growth and achieving targets, right, but also sort of how do we practice sort of this like this combined mind and body open-hearted idea. So I wanted to come back in to sort of dig in a little bit more into some of the significance and behaviors, maybe a bit more specific, thinking about like, so like, how do we practice it, right? Less about sort of like, what is it, kind of like, what are our ideas about it? And I love how Skye mentioned as well, that maybe people automatically think, oh, nonprofit sector, so compassionate leadership, right? And but then there also might be levied sometimes a critique that if we're always leading with our hearts, then maybe we're not so good with the financials, or with some of these these other aspects of management that are that are so important in the field. But I think compassion is more, right, than just maybe what people might first think when they first hear about it, right, is that it can be quite serious, actually, right, to lead with the heart, to make tough decisions sometimes, and in a compassionate way, to deliver bad news, in a compassionate way. So maybe let's come back to Skye. And what would you say, in your experience, think about some of the behaviors about how you practice it, or how you've observed other people practice it as well? You may have some, people that you kind of look up to in the field, for example. So can you think of an example about a time you've practiced it and you felt it had made a significant difference?
I think if I think back, we've had quite a few instances where I think both myself and my teammates have also tried to practice this, maybe without having the intention of doing so, but just realizing that just became a natural part of how we led. I think one of the things that stick out to me would be in 2019, when the social movement first started. I think one of the things that we had to stop and acknowledge is that while on one hand, we were really looking at how to support the mental health needs of young people during that really critically challenging time, as within management and even within leadership, we had to recognize that our team were also young people who were also struggling with the same struggles of the young people that we were serving. And so what that meant was, on one hand, you would want to focus on the work and the business, which is, okay, how do we look at our services? How do we make our reach more available? How do we actually get our support out there in the way that we need to? And balance actually also the well-being of our team as well. So we actually made the decision to stop. And before we talked business, we actually created intentional moments during staff meetings or intentional invitations during one-on-one sessions with our team to actually say, okay, let's just put aside the work. How are you doing and what are you struggling with in terms of this topic at the moment? And we had maybe about a month of these conversations where we didn't make decision to do anything just yet. We just focused on what our team was processing through themselves, and then the issues that they were thinking were important to them. And what we realized, the conversations that came out of that was that a lot of what our own team were struggling with was what the wider population was also struggling with. And that made it much more easier when we started talking about solutions, that it became almost a natural extension. And not only that, but it was also a very purpose-driven process, because no longer were we just thinking about, okay, things that we needed to do and the business and sort of like the service changing, but actually it came as an overflow of what our team was already personally experiencing. And that actually also helped us with difficult conversations that we needed to have, because a lot of that had already been through the process, And so, we had days, where we had teammates, we had lots of tissue boxes, and lots of closed door, sort of like, this is a safe space, say what you need, shout if you need, go away and have a really long lunch break if you need, type of moments. But what came out of that, I felt, was a very unified sort of drive, for us to really be clear on what it is that we wanted to focus on as a result, and how we wanted to help young people within our existing services or outside of that. And so that's an example, of, it was tough because, we had to spend time to actually pause on things, and where do you dedicate that time, right? But I think it was definitely well worth it to do that, and to actually dive into the sensitivity of it all, because it was very sensitive at that time. A lot of things were polarized, if you remember, and we just dove straight into it, and head first, which I think I'm really grateful for that experience, and just the belief that everybody had on to be able to allow everyone that. And I think that for me defines compassionate leadership, one-on-one.
Yeah. Oh, again, so many things you said in there, but I'm gonna go to Dorothy, because I'm conscious that an hour is a very short period of time, and I want to talk more. Dorothy, for yourself, thinking about, if you can come up with some example or experience you recall about the significance of practicing compassionate leadership and/or the behaviors associated with a compassionate leader. Would love to hear a bit more about your thoughts as well.
Yeah, to echo Sky's experience during the movement, we also had a session where we brought in coaches, executive coaches, to use movement, like tremors, TRE, to allow them to physically release those tremors and stress and traumas, as well as creating those safe spaces. And the feedback from the team was like, they had no one else to turn to, right? They might have had fights with their family, they have fights with their friends, and everyone feels so tight. And actually, but being in a company, allowing them to have that neutral and safe space to share was super, super important. And I think the significance is that we really see unity of the team, and that they feel supported and listened to without judgment, and that we actually feel like a family at the company that they can trust. So I think that's really important. And definitely, you know, Michael, one of our teammates, has been with us since day one. And I think that's really a sign to show that that listening and that you know, in Chinese we say 同行, right? You walk together. I think that's really important. And every new teammate, we onboard them on our values and how they treat others as well on the team. So I think really that's a significant of compassionate leadership.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and again, so many thoughts. Like one of the thoughts I had, you know, listening to both of you and then ending with Dorothy said is, you know, in that one of the impacts in some ways, right, of the pandemic, you know, is that we globally see this change in the labor market, right? You know, where, you know, the labor market's really tight and, you know, there's a lot of people looking for, you know, for employees. And, you know, and I think that one of the things that it makes me think about is how it almost becomes even then that more critical, right? That we're creating the kind of environments that people want to come and stay in, you know, sort of thing. Or, you know, if they're leaving because maybe they're sort of, that's, I think, like the seed has grown, you know, like, and they're taking that, you know, kind of into something new rather than that they're leaving because, you know, they aren't getting, you know, some of the things maybe that might be thought of sometimes as the softer side, you know, of, you know, kind of the experience in the workplace that a lot of, I think, our young people too are, you know, they're looking for more than a job, you know, right? You know, they're looking for, you know, for other, we heard that from our stakeholder meeting about some of the things that young people, you know, want, you know, from the people that are leading them, and some of the qualities that you're talking about, I think fit the bill for some of those people. Because we want to have time to get to some of the questions from the floor, which we've got a few questions coming in. But I first want to ask one more question, which is about strategies that you have used or might also recommend others could consider to help cope with the negative sort of psychological, experience that some people have been having, both, as we said, here in Hong Kong, we've had the double whammy, I like to say, of the lasting impacts of the period of extreme social, unrest, and then also the pandemic and the containment strategies, right? I mean, to me, that's a big part of it, right? It's not so much the pandemic, but kind of how that everything that leads to. So what are some of the ways and the things that you find are useful to, to help address those concerns that you might have about your staff well-being? Yeah. So Sky, you want to go?
Sure. I mean, I think that these are very practical, maybe some examples that we have actually used or done in our organization. I think the first thing, just with how COVID has affected everyone's scheduling, I know that a lot of people will say, okay, mandatory, you must go back to the office, but I think because of COVID, what we have done is we've just made work just completely flexible. And for a long time, that was truly what it was. It was, we know that this week you're going to focus on this, do it, whenever time, whatever works for you. If you need to take a break halfway through the day because of something happening at home, just let us know, that type of thing. And even now, as we are reverting back to the office, we are looking at implementing and keeping up this flexibility. I think that some organizations that I know have completely just made continued flexible working, choose to come back to the office if you would like, but if you don't, that's fine too. And I think that also has cultivated a lot of trust, which inevitably really helps with staff's need, especially if they're not in a fantastic place. I think just encouragement overall, increased frequency of like checking-ins, but also just purposeful check-ins that are more fun oriented, really creating an atmosphere of supportiveness. For us as an organization, support, very similar to Dorothy and her organization. I think for us, peer support is really important. It's why we started, it's how we started as an organization. So creating fun things in the office, you know, to really be able to celebrate each other. We celebrate so many things all the time, including, you know, the first time we went back face to face to do training versus, you know, having done Zoom for like X number of months. So like, I think creating those opportunities and being intentional about celebrating them all around has been something that we feel has helped staff to really cope. But one thing that I feel like is something that I personally have been very intentional about is I think that honesty and transparency from leadership is very critical, particularly in times of crisis. It's almost like, you know, I think, you know, our team often would want to know, okay, where are we going? What's happening out there, you know? And I think it's so easy to feel disconnected that when you increase sort of the honesty and saying, hey, actually, we have no idea, you know, or, you know, financially, we're not doing that hot, you know, and actually saying, okay, because of what's happening, we're thinking of doing this completely. You know, I think that having that open sort of sharing to make it relevant for the team has increased a lot of their sort of engagement also with the organization, and therefore making their purpose in the organization more than just a job. But also, you know, if the leadership is caring about these things enough to share with them, how then can they also care within their own roles with the young people that they're serving and providing services for? So I think there's a little bit of a filter down effect as well. At least I hope, you know, we have seen some positive comments just in terms of how the team feedback to us, where they have been as we do regular check-ins. So that's just a few things that, you know, we've done. Maybe
just a few things, she says. Yeah, I mean, so many things, right? And I also heard a lot of things in there about, I mean, there are things that are so transferable to just kind of like, I feel contemporary times, you know, where there's so many things changing so often, and just that need, you know, to be adaptable, you know, to things. And I also heard a lot of things that rang in my mind, the sort of startup bell, ding, 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 which actually makes a good thing to come back to you know, to Dorothy about it, which is, you know, that, yeah, being that kind of ethos about transparency, you know, openness and inclusiveness of, you know, getting feedback about how we're doing and things like that. So yeah, Dorothy, tell us a bit about strategies that you've been using for coping with the psychological impacts of everything going on.
Yeah, I think a more management leadership word and concept that we've really been adopting is more invisible leadership. So invisible leadership, it's this actually framework created by Sammy Lee, the fourth generation of the Lee Kum-Kee family, and he started his own brand, the healthcare products and the health products group, and I think it's one of the largest direct sales company in China selling modernized, you know, Chinese medicine. And I think their framework of invisible leadership has another dimension to leadership, which is beyond compassion, is allowing the team to feel empowered to take leadership of their own and be on autopilot, basically, and how that they feel that they have this this space to be able to do that. So during COVID, we have more times for that direct communication, to allow them to give that space for them to take up the leadership within the organization. Some practical steps we took, you know, kind of, I always say having the hamburger approach in talking to someone. So start with the good, and then the what you can improve, and then and wrap up with something good again. So that's something, you know, in coaching, if you want to talk to your team on some direct feedback, that's a great approach. We've done card games. Yesterday we had, during team lunch every Monday, we have a full team lunchtime, and we pulled out these affirmation cards where people, you know, pulled out like energy, they pulled out like sanctuary or tenacity, you know, these words that resonate, or trust, you know, words that resonate with different teammates, and giving them and pairing them up So we find that, Hong Kong people actually are very shy. So when you put them all in a big room, like with 12, 15 people, they're like, oh, I don't want to say anything, But actually, when you pair them up, they were like, wow, they have a lot to share. So I think sometimes breaking them into smaller groups, giving them the space to do it is also very fun. Just also would love to share my screen
Sure.
for a hot second. We really try to integrate our impact philosophy from that is connecting your body, mind, spirit. So we start from the bottom, start practicing with your body, your mind, and your spirit. So, body is like sleeping well. We check in about, are you eating well, sleeping well, exercising, so that you can have a healthy mind, positive mindset. Then, trusting people to being spiritually awakened in terms of finding your purpose, your calling, your joy, and also the culture of the company is the spirit of the company. Then caring about society and our social communities, to then caring about the planet, right, our environment. And this photo was a retreat, a company retreat with all of our partners. So here you have startup founders, you have corporate leaders, you have investors and NGO leaders, school teachers, and coming together for a retreat out in nature. So especially for COVID times, you can't be indoors. So for us, nature was definitely this amazing outlet where we can connect with ourselves and each other. So I think that's always, something to think out of the box. So we hosted meetings there, brainstorming, yoga, meditation. We sat by a fire. We talked about, our purpose of why we started the social enterprise. And I think having an outside of work time is super important because we can really connect as friends and as individuals. So we take away our labels, we take away our name cards, but actually just meet each other as a person. And I think that's also a great opportunity to connect.
Right. I mean, and I think, thank you so much for sharing this, this image with us. And, I think it's so resonant as well with the idea about, that in the literature around, what nurturing compassion is about. And, starting with the self, right? And, starting with all parts of the self, and then, then moving out. And I think, again, this is something that we see all the time in the nonprofit sector, which is that, it's like if the leader doesn't care for themselves, right, then it has a knock-on effect. And so I think that's a lovely image to display your approach, but that is really resonant with the ideas that we're talking about. Yeah. We have a few questions from the floor, and one of them is, well, hopefully we maybe addressed this. This comes from Clive Lee, who I recognize name. He's a graduate from the Nonprofit Management Program. How to develop compassionate leadership in an organization. So I think we've touched on that some, but I guess maybe in just a brief response from either Dorothy or Sky about some of the specific things that maybe you practices you take to work on developing compassionate leadership in your organizations. I know you've already spoken about it somewhat, but a brief summation of it. Sky? Yeah.
Thanks, Clive, for that question. I think it's really through role modeling and how you build that into becoming part of your organization's culture, just on all levels. I really love what Dorothy was saying in terms of invisible leadership. I'm not sure whether we're there yet, but I think definitely, I think being a role model as somebody who is in leadership is definitely the way to start. Because if you set the tone for where the organization is going and how we approach everyone and everything, ultimately it also will filter down to the rest. And I think when I look back at our organization's values, our core values as an organization, actually all of those words are what everyone earlier used to define compassionate leadership. So like empathy, support, non-judgment, like all of that is actually part and parcel of compassionate leadership and already embedded in our organization's culture as well. So I think that those two, when married together, help to develop, at least at the first onset.
Excellent. Since we have just a few minutes, I'm going to move to the next question, but of course you can fold in an answer if you're so inclined with it. There's an interesting question about how does culture affect compassionate leadership? I think so. It's a multi-phase question. So I'm going to start with that one because the next ones kind of get a bit more, well, I'll read the whole thing yet. Who are the leading voices in the West, it says, and then who are the voices in Asian, Chinese, or local context to recommend for further reading. So how does culture affect compassionate leadership? Dorothy, any thoughts, or Sky, I guess, whoever. So Dorothy, okay, let's go for it.
Yeah, I think I briefly addressed it, I think in local NGOs, which I think people are less likely to voice their opinions or their feelings directly. I think, when you ask them, how do you feel? I think I spent 4 years training, teaching one of my teammates of these are feeling words and these are thinking words. And so, and being in touch with how they feel is quite challenging. It can be. So allowing them to have different outlets. I think so culture definitely has that effect. And I think in Canto culture, you kind of need to have side questions or you go out for coffee, you go out for random things like basketball and actually get to know them that way versus maybe in the West, I think people are more direct about how they feel.
Conversation, yeah.
Upset about something, they'll say it right away. So I think it's a balance between the two.
Yeah, no, definitely. As you can see, I relate. So, Sky, anything extra to add? I think it's a super interesting question. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts on it. Yeah.
I definitely think so too. One time I did an exercise very similar to what Dorothy said she had done, and it was about helping people to sort of express, appreciation, because again, that's also part of being compassionate, right? Is to appreciate. And actually, I had a colleague who pulled me aside later and was like, felt really uncomfortable and felt it was really weird to have to acknowledge and appreciate people, and I think that, I thought about that, and I think that's very cultural, because in Hong Kong or in Chinese culture, we're not necessarily people who use words to appreciate and to acknowledge all the time. We don't purposely say that. It feels uncomfortable. But actually, there is other ways of also doing it, and I found that out over the years, is that actually you can use different methods to help people to be able to know that they've been appreciated, and part of that process was actually asking people how they feel they could be part of it. And actually, one of the things that that came out of it is that they wanted to have input in terms of what direction was going towards. And when they were able to participate in what they had inputted, they knew that they were appreciated, because then they got acknowledgement to be a part of something that they designed themselves.
Right.
And so I don't know, it's just, I think it's a interesting one. I think as we become more and more modernized, or as we become, different generations, I think we will find more methods to manage how culture will affect compassionate leadership.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, I think it's a really, really nice place, I think, to sort of wrap up the panel, just because for the sake of not having enough time, that this idea, it made me think when you were both talking as well about just love languages too, right? Which is, of course, is talking about more interpersonal relationship, but it's a similar idea about the fact that, I mean, culture is a major thing, right? That informs just how we as individuals operate in the world, but also how we collectively operate. And and in a place, such as Hong Kong, I loved how, Dorothy said in Canto culture, and it's okay, so right away, right, Canto culture, I'm on the outside of Canto culture, right? I live here, right? I could maybe be a part of it, to join it, right? But I'm not, I'm not of it. And, and Hong Kong is that kind of a place, right? Where we have people from all different kinds of places. And there are very strong pockets of different kinds of culture, here. And, that all, kind of are part of the mix of, how we interact and how we operate within our organizations. And also I'd say collaboratively as well. So I want to, thank you all incredibly, for participating, in the discussion right now. We're not quite done, but I'm going to come back over to the last bit of sharing I want to do on the slides. Okay, here we go. Just to wrap things up for the day, This slide offers a few insights from some research that is ongoing. There's a link down at the bottom to an article with the Harvard Business Review, Compassionate Leadership is Necessary, but Not Sufficient. So you can read more about it there. There's also a sort of self-assessment tool that you can utilize to sort of see where you fall on this matrix of compassion, wisdom, ignorance, and indifference. And I did it myself, and I thought it was kind of interesting. And there's a few tips as well about how to increase compassion. So that's the orange in the top part about practicing self-compassion. So something that we're beginning to work a little bit with the mindfulness exercise. Checking our intentions about what are we actually intending, and then is what we're doing a match with that. And adopting some kind of a daily compassion practice. And which can be something as simple, right, as like, thank you. It's like, can be very, something very, very small. But to increase wisdom, right? So because these researchers talk about the importance of having compassion and wisdom, that those two things together are sort of what we most want to have, right? So again, compassion is necessary, but not sufficient. Wisdom is the other part. So if we need to increase the wisdom side, we need to practice candid transparency. So, you all were just talking about the importance of leading with transparency. Also, we can practice having a daily direct interaction. So I think this is very interesting when we talk about, say, the local culture where maybe things happen more indirectly, right? But it's similar to what I think both Sky and Dorothy said. How can we find those indirect, direct ways to communicate? Kind of thing, right? So maybe it's an indirect method, but still has that goal of getting across the direct communication. And then the final part would be adopting a daily mindfulness training. So I want to give just the shout out that we have coming up a few more sessions on quite different topics. So cross-sector collaboration, innovation, evidence-informed decision-making, and sustainability. But thank you so much to Sky and Dorothy and everybody else that joined us today for this Lunch and Learn webinar. I'm really excited to kick off this Taster series with this topic. And we will also be sharing out some more resources for people that want to follow up and dig into the topic a little bit more. And I really look forward to greeting you all again on another webinar or face-to-face in the coming months. So thank you and have a great day and a great week. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.